In the time tunnel, two scientists were hurled through history, never knowing where or when they would survive next. But 60 years later, the cast faced a far crueler journey, filled with loss, heartbreak, and silent disappearances. What really happened to them after the spotlight faded? Today, we uncover the shocking truth behind their lives, and it's not what you expect. James Darren as Dr. Tony Newman. James Darren was born on June 8, 1936, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. At 30 years old, he played Dr. Tony Newman, the impulsive and emotionally driven scientist in the Time Tunnel, 1966 to 1967. The role injected urgency and emotional risk into the series, turning time travel into a personal gamble rather than a cold scientific experiment. That intensity did not come from nowhere. Darren grew up in a working-class Italian-American household where money was scarce and stability fragile, and that pressure shaped his earliest years. He left school early to chase auditions, only to face repeated rejection and isolation, scraping by while dreaming of escape. When success finally arrived through youth-driven projects like Gidget, the sudden fame felt less like triumph and more like his fragile lifeline. That fear followed him into marriage. His first wife, Gloria Terlitsky, married him in 1955 before fame struck. But as his career surged, the relationship buckled under stress, religious tension, and constant absence, ending in divorce just 3 years later. His second marriage to Evie Norland, Miss Denmark 1958, brought a longer sense of structure and family. Yet even this union endured long emotional distances as Darren juggled acting and later directing work on television series such as T.J. Hooker. While his career evolved, his body began to resist the pace he had lived for decades. Darren developed severe cardiovascular problems, enduring repeated cardiac complications that worsened over time. Doctors evaluated him for aortic valve surgery, but his condition deteriorated too quickly, forcing him into a quiet, painful decline while his public presence faded. Finally, James Darren died in his sleep on September 2nd, 2024, at 88 years old, from congestive heart failure, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. His estimated $10 million net worth, built from acting, music, and directing, stands as evidence of longevity rather than ease, a life spent surviving success as much as earning it. Robert Colbert as Dr. Doug Phillips. Robert Colbert was born on July 26, 1931, in Long Beach, California, USA. At 35 years old, he played Dr. Doug Phillips, the disciplined analytical physicist in the Time Tunnel, 1966 to 1967. His calm authority grounded the series, giving scientific credibility to its wild historical leaps and stabilizing the emotional volatility around him. That composure was forged early. Raised in a military family, Colbert's childhood was marked by constant relocations and rigid discipline. Each move demanded adaptation, and over time, he learned to rely on restraint rather than connection, a habit that followed him into adulthood and shaped his screen presence in later television work such as Maverick. That same reserve complicated his personal life. He married Dorothy "Dottie" Harmon in 1961, but conflicting schedules and financial pressures eroded the marriage, ending in divorce in 1976. Decades later, he married Elise Bateau, finding stability rather than passion, a partnership defined more by endurance than intensity, echoing the quiet resilience that had defined his career after the Time Tunnel. As the years progressed, Colbert gradually stepped away from leading roles, choosing consistency over reinvention. He continued appearing in television projects and later maintained visibility through fan conventions, while age imposed natural physical limits. His later professional life reflected the same steady reliability audiences had seen earlier in roles on long-running series like The Young and the Restless. Today, Robert Colbert is 95 years old. He lives in retirement, making occasional appearances at science fiction and Western conventions and participating in charity events, remaining connected to the legacy that once defined him. His estimated $4 million net worth reflects a career built not on explosive fame, but on persistence. Whit Bissell as Lieutenant General Heywood Kirk. Whit Bissell was born on October 25, 1909, in New York City, USA. At 57 years old, he played Lieutenant General Heywood Kirk, the stern, authority-driven military overseer in the Time Tunnel, 1966 to 1967. His presence gave the series institutional weight, embodying the pressure, urgency, and moral rigidity behind the time travel project. That authoritative calm was shaped early in life. Born into a wealthy, academically demanding family, Bissell grew up under relentless expectations from parents who valued prestige and discipline above emotional comfort. His struggle at university and decision to abandon a conventional path for acting created lasting family conflict, forcing him to choose between approval and identity. Those unresolved pressures spilled into his personal life. Bissell's first marriage to Adrienne Marden collapsed in 1954 as his career intensified, followed by a brief and fragile second marriage to Dilys Mary Shan Jukes, which ended in loss and grief. His final marriage to Jennifer Rain in 1967 offered greater stability, yet even this bond was marked by deep sorrow, including the pain of losing a child. As the years passed, his physical control began to fail him. Bissell lived for many years with Parkinson's disease, enduring tremors, impaired movement, and gradual loss of independence. The illness eroded the commanding presence audiences knew, even as he continued appearing in projects connected to his legacy, including his final performance revisiting the Time Machine universe in the early 1990s. Sadly, Whit Bissell died on March 5, 1996, at 86 years old, from complications of Parkinson's disease, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Los Angeles. He was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, among fellow Hollywood veterans. His estimated $2 million net worth reflected not stardom, but a lifetime of steady contribution. Lee Meriwether as Dr. Anne McGregor Lee. Meriwether was born on May 27, 1935 in Los Angeles, California, USA. At 31 years old, she played Dr. Anne McGregor, the composed and brilliant female scientist in the Time Tunnel, 1966 to 1967. Her role brought intelligence and emotional balance to the series, quietly challenging gender norms in a genre dominated by male authority. That quiet strength was forged through early insecurity. As a child, Meriwether experienced repeated relocations between California and Arizona, struggling with self-doubt while facing intense pressure from academics and competitive beauty culture. Winning Miss America 1955 gave her public validation, but behind the crown lingered anxiety and the fear of being valued more for appearance than substance. Success did not shield her from personal fractures. Her marriage to actor Frank Alliter began in optimism, but deteriorated under competing careers and emotional distance, ending in divorce in 1974 after 2 daughters. Years later, her marriage to Marshall Borden brought companionship and stability, though aging introduced new strains, forcing both partners to adapt to changing energy, priorities, and physical limits. Rather than retreat, Meriwether redirected her focus into sustained creative work. She built a second major chapter of her career on Barnaby Jones, where her grounded performance earned critical recognition, and later continued working steadily across television, film, and voice acting. Proof that longevity, not spectacle, defined her professional life. Today, Lee Meriwether is 91 years old. She remains active through public appearances, fan conventions, and selective creative projects, maintaining a visible presence decades after her breakthrough. With an estimated net worth of around $8 million, her life stands as a rare Hollywood arc. John Zaremba as Dr. Raymond Swain. John Zaremba was born on October 22, 1908, in Chicago, Illinois, USA. At 58 years old, he played Dr. Raymond Swain, the composed and methodical medical authority in The Time Tunnel, 1966 to 1967. His role grounded the series with clinical realism, turning chaos into procedure and making the time tunnel feel like a place governed by rules rather than miracles. That calm authority grew out of hardship. Zaremba was raised in a poor household and learned early that survival depended on discipline and persistence. Before acting paid the bills, he worked as a journalist, writing for newspapers while struggling to break into Hollywood, facing financial strain and repeated rejection. Those years sharpened his observational instincts, later visible in restrained performances in science fiction films like Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Stability at home became his anchor. Zaremba married Eleanor Deck Suter in 1936, and their marriage endured for 5 decades, producing 3 children. While his career expanded across television, most notably as a doctor on Perry Mason, the demands of steady work and long shoots tested the family rhythm, creating a quiet tension between professional reliability and domestic presence that he carried without complaint. As time passed, his body began to betray the composure audiences trusted. Zaremba developed serious cardiovascular problems, continuing to work while managing a condition that demanded caution. Even as his health narrowed his range, he appeared in later projects with the same gravity, including authority roles that echoed his time tunnel persona, proof of how deeply that image had fused with his identity. Sadly, John Zaremba died on December 15, 1986, at 78 years old, from a heart attack in Newport Beach, California. His estimated $1 million net worth, earned largely from long-running television work, marked a life spent holding fictional worlds together while privately racing against a failing heart. Wesley Lau as Sergeant Jiggs. Wesley Lau was born on June 18, 1921, in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, USA. At 45 years old, he played Sergeant Jiggs, the tough, grounded military presence in The Time Tunnel, 1966. His character added grit and realism to the series, reminding viewers that time travel was still shaped by human fear, duty, and consequence. That edge came from lived experience. Lau's youth was interrupted by World War II, where he served in the U.S. Air Force and carried home the psychological weight of combat. Returning to civilian life brought restlessness and strain, and although he studied writing and acting, financial pressure pushed him toward steady screen work. The tension between ambition and survival followed him into roles that demanded authority, such as his long tenure on Perry Mason. His personal life reflected similar instability. Lau married twice, first to Sirin Devram, a relationship that ended in divorce, and later to Mary Louise Metcalf, with whom he had 2 children. Long hours, emotional distance, and unresolved wartime trauma strained both marriages, leaving behind fractures that never fully healed even as his professional visibility grew. Health would become his final battle. Lau was diagnosed with cancer, a prolonged illness that weakened him physically and emotionally. As the disease advanced, it placed enormous stress on his heart, cutting short his ability to work and quietly closing the chapter on a career that had included films like I Want to Live and a wide range of television appearances. Finally, Wesley Lau died on August 30, 1984, at 63 years old, from heart failure following cancer complications in Los Angeles, California, and was buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. His estimated $500,000 net worth reflected a working actor's life, productive, relentless, and ultimately costly, leaving behind not glamour, but the residue of endurance and sacrifice. Malachi Throne as Mecha. Malachi Throne was born on December 1, 1928, in New York City, USA. At 38 years old, he played Mecha, the enigmatic and morally ambiguous figure in The Time Tunnel, 1966. Though not the central hero, His presence added mystery and unease, reinforcing the series' sense that time itself could not be trusted. That tension reflected a difficult beginning. Raised in a poor immigrant household in the Bronx, Throne grew up under financial pressure and early responsibility. His youth was interrupted by military service during the Korean War, an experience that left him with lingering psychological strain and a sharpened seriousness, qualities that later surfaced in intense television work such as Ben Casey. Adulthood brought professional momentum, but personal complexity. Throne married Judith Marians in the mid-1960s, a relationship that produced 2 sons but eventually fractured under career demands and emotional distance, ending in divorce. Years later, he married Marjorie Bernstein, finding greater stability, though the scars of earlier years never fully disappeared, even as his career expanded into steady character work. As his body aged, his voice became his defining instrument. Throne's haunting vocal performance as the Keeper in Star Trek immortalized him in science fiction history, while later appearances continued to rely on his authority and gravitas. Yet behind that commanding presence, years of heavy smoking took a toll, leading to a devastating diagnosis that slowly narrowed his world. Malachi Throne died on March 13, 2013, at 84 years old, from lung cancer, at his home in Brentwood, California. His final months were marked by physical decline and quiet withdrawal, far removed from the powerful voices he once embodied. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, his legacy rests not on fame alone, but on the unforgettable weight he brought to characters who lingered long after the screen faded to black. Sam Groom as Jory. Sam Groom was born on June 13, 1938, in Columbus, Ohio, USA. At 27 years old, he played Jory, the young and idealistic scientist in The Time Tunnel, 1966. His role symbolized the future-facing optimism of the project, adding youthful energy to a story dominated by authority and experience. That optimism was shaped early by discipline rather than trauma. Groom's childhood was relatively stable, though marked by academic pressure and expectations that demanded focus and self-control. Acting became an outlet, and early television exposure soon led him toward long-running dramatic work, including formative roles that tested his endurance and emotional range. Success, however, did not translate into personal permanence. Groom married Kathleen Marie Sullivan, and while they raised 3 children together, the marriage collapsed under the strain of career uncertainty and constant relocation. A later marriage to Suzanne Rogers ended in divorce as well, reinforcing a pattern in which professional survival repeatedly undercut emotional stability. Instead of retreating, Groom leaned deeper into work. He became widely recognized through Another World, a role that required relentless production schedules and emotional consistency, and later anchored medical dramas such as Police Surgeon. Over time, his focus shifted toward mentorship, using decades of experience to shape younger performers rather than chase leading roles. Today, Sam Groom is 88 years old. He continues to work quietly as an acting instructor at HB Studio in New York, choosing legacy over visibility. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, his story closes not with decline, but with transmission, passing forward the discipline that once carried a young scientist through the time tunnel itself. Michael Ansara as Colonel Hruda. Michael Ansara was born on April 15, 1922 in Syria, and immigrated to the United States as a child in 1924. At 44 years old, he played Colonel Hruda, the imposing and disciplined military commander in The Time Tunnel, 1966. The role reinforced the series' sense of global stakes, giving its Cold War tensions a stern, believable human face. That gravity was shaped early. Growing up as an immigrant, Ansara struggled with cultural displacement, poverty, and the pressure to assimilate, experiences that left him guarded and inwardly driven. Acting became a way to claim identity and control, and those early struggles later surfaced in dignified performances that demanded respect, including his breakthrough as Cochise in Broken Arrow. His personal life mirrored the instability of his career. Ansara married Jean Byron in 1949, but the marriage collapsed as his workload intensified. His second marriage to Barbara Eden, formed at the height of Broken Arrow, was passionate, yet strained by shifting fame and devastating personal loss, including the death of their son Matthew decades later, a wound that never healed. His final marriage to Beverly Kushida brought quieter stability, though sorrow remained a constant undercurrent. As years passed, the roles changed, but his voice and presence endured. He became iconic in science fiction as Commander Kang in Star Trek, embodying honor and menace in equal measure. Behind the scenes, however, his health deteriorated as Alzheimer's disease slowly erased memory and independence, turning a once commanding mind into a battlefield of confusion and loss. Sadly, Michael Ansara died at home in Calabasas, California, on July 31, 2013, at 91 years old, from complications of Alzheimer's disease, and was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills, beside his son. His estimated $8 million net worth reflected a long, varied career, but his true legacy lies in the dignity he brought to characters who were once denied it. Carroll O'Connor as General Southall. Carroll O'Connor was born on August 2, 1924, in Bronx, New York, USA. At 42 years old, he played General Southall, the authoritative and morally rigid military figure in The Time Tunnel, 1966. Though brief, the role foreshadowed his mastery of complex authority figures who carried both power and contradiction. His early life was marked by hardship. Raised in a poor household shadowed by his father's imprisonment, O'Connor grew up with instability and anger simmering beneath the surface. Education became both escape and rebellion, shaping a sharp intellect that later fueled roles demanding moral tension, long before fame arrived through All in the Family. Marriage offered constancy amid chaos. O'Connor married Nancy Fields in 1951, a partnership that endured for half a century and weathered professional uncertainty, public scrutiny, and devastating loss. The suicide of their son Hugh in 1995 shattered the family, transforming O'Connor's private grief into public activism, even as he continued working through emotional pain. Physically, his body began to fail as stress accumulated. Long-term diabetes weakened his heart and repeated surgeries signaled decline. Still, he continued performing in demanding roles, including In the Heat of the Night. Finally, Carroll O'Connor died on June 21, 2001, at 76 years old from a heart attack related to diabetic complications in Culver City, California. He was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, with his son's cenotaph beside him. With an estimated $20 million net worth, his life closed not in comfort, but in the shadow of loss, leaving behind a legacy defined as much by courage as by grief. Michael Rennie as Captain Malcolm Smith. Michael Rennie was born on August 25, 1909, in Idle, West Yorkshire, England. At 57 years old, he played Captain Malcolm Smith, the calm yet doomed officer aboard the Titanic in The Time Tunnel, 1966. His restrained performance grounded the series' very first episode in realism, turning spectacle into quiet tragedy. That restraint was learned early. Rennie grew up under the heavy expectations of a wealthy family whose wool business had existed for generations, and the pressure to inherit it left him deeply conflicted. Rejecting that path came at a cost: family tension, financial uncertainty, and years of starting over. Experiences that later shaped his screen persona in serious roles such as Les Miserables, where dignity masked inner defeat. Fame arrived suddenly but proved unstable. After becoming iconic as Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still, Rennie married twice, first to Joan England, then to Margaret Maggie McGrath, and both marriages ended in divorce. Behind the polished leading man image were emotional fractures, complicated relationships, and a private life marked by distance rather than permanence. As Hollywood shifted, so did his health. Years of heavy smoking led to emphysema, slowly eroding his strength even as he continued working in films like The Lost World and numerous television dramas. The decline was gradual but relentless, forcing him to retreat from the industry long before the public realized how ill he had become. Sadly, Michael Rennie died on June 10, 1971, at 61 years old, in Harrogate, England, from complications linked to emphysema. He was buried at Harlow Hill Cemetery, far from Hollywood, in a quiet return to his roots. With an estimated net worth of around $5 million, his life closed not in triumph but in exhaustion, leaving behind a legacy defined by elegance, restraint, and a warning that even icons fade. Victor Jory, as Nar Hawk. Victor Jory was born on November 23, 1902, in Dawson City, Yukon, Canada. At 64 years old, he played Nar Hawk, the menacing and primal antagonist in The Time Tunnel, 1966. His intimidating presence heightened the episode's danger, reminding viewers that brute force could be as terrifying as time itself. That menace was forged through hardship. Raised in harsh frontier conditions, Jory grew up fighting for survival, even turning to boxing and wrestling to earn money. Poverty, violence, and physical endurance shaped both his body and his worldview, later informing performances in films like Gone with the Wind, where cruelty felt disturbingly authentic. Stability came through marriage, though not without sacrifice. Jory married Jean Innes in 1928, and the union lasted 50 years until her death in 1978. While his career thrived, long separations and relentless work created emotional distance, even as he remained devoted to his family and later to teaching, passing his craft to younger generations. Age eventually took its toll. Decades of physically demanding roles and stress weakened his heart, yet he continued acting into his 70s, appearing in respected works such as The Miracle Worker. His final years were quieter, marked by reflection rather than reinvention, as the strength that once defined him slowly ebbed away. Victor Jory died on February 12, 1982, at 79 years old, from a heart attack in Santa Monica, California. He was laid to rest with the respect of a veteran performer, remembered for his voice, presence, and intensity. With an estimated net worth of about $3 million, his legacy endures not in wealth, but in the unforgettable shadow he cast across cinema history. They once vanished into history, jumping from war zones to lost civilizations, never knowing if they would return. But long after the tunnel closed, real life proved far less forgiving, marked by faded fame, personal loss, and quiet endings far from the spotlight. Did time treat them kindly? Or was the real journey the one that broke them? Let us know what surprised you the most in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories hidden behind classic television.